Most people do not stay broke because money is mysterious. They stay broke because they keep reaching for a speed that belongs to a different version of themselves. I have watched this my entire life. A man earning a steady salary looks at a founder and wants founder money. A timid saver looks at a trader and wants trader returns. An employee with no taste, no sales ability, no network, and no stomach for volatility starts fantasizing about overnight wealth as if desire itself were an asset. It is not. Fast money is not a road, it is a ladder, and every rung on that ladder demands a different spine, a different tolerance for pain, a different relationship with risk, and a different level of control. That is the first truth most people hate. You do not get paid because you want money badly enough. You get paid because you have become the kind of person a certain rung can reward. If you miss that, you make the most expensive mistake in personal finance. You keep using a safe person's habits to chase dangerous outcomes. Or you keep using a reckless person's fantasies to sabotage the one boring path that actually could have worked for you. I have no patience for that confusion. I do not worship speed. I worship fit. If you want to get rich faster, the question is not which path is fastest. The question is which rung can actually hold my weight. And what must I become before I step on the next one? Most people never ask it that way. They hear a story about somebody who bought the right thing, joined the right company, bet on the right trade, made the right video, inherited the right check, or caught the right wave, and they turn a rare outcome into a general strategy. That is how people lose years. They imitate the visible payoff and ignore the invisible requirements. So let me give it to you without perfume. The wealth ladder has slow rungs, sudden rungs, borrowed rungs, and explosive rungs. Some rungs make you rich by discipline. Some make you rich by ownership. Some make you rich by leverage. Some make you rich by attention. Some make you rich by proximity. And some are not wealth strategies at all. They are identity tests dressed up as opportunities. If you do not know the difference, speed will ruin you. The first rung is the one impatient people insult and disciplined people quietly use. You build a valuable skill. You earn a high income. You save aggressively. You buy productive assets month after month. You do not touch them. This is the rung almost nobody brags about because it is too clean, too mathematical, too unromantic. But I have always trusted boring math more than loud stories. An engineer who saves $2,000 a month and keeps feeding broad productive assets for 15 years can build a very serious net worth without any miracle, without any viral moment, without any genius level innovation. What destroys this rung is not lack of possibility. It is lifestyle inflation, distraction, and the childish hunger to feel rich before becoming rich. I call this the discipline rung. The discipline rung does not fail you. You fail it when your income rises and your standards rise faster. You fail it when you want the optics of success before the engine of success is fully built. You fail it when you confuse activity with allocation. Most people say they want wealth. What they really want is upgraded consumption without delayed gratification. Those are different religions. If you can stay on this rung long enough, you may not become legendary, but you can become free. And freedom is worth more than applause. Now we move to a very different rung. This is where money stops growing linearly and starts jumping. Not because the world became fairer, but because ownership entered the room. A lot of fortunes are not built by working harder. They are built by owning a system, a piece of a system, or the option on a future system. That is why joining the right company early can beat decades of respectable employment. If you take salary only, you are renting out your time. If you take equity in the right machine and stay long enough for the machine to go public or get repriced, the exact same years can produce a completely different outcome. The labor may look similar from the outside. The capital structure is not. I call this the ownership jump. The ownership jump is where ordinary people first discover that two careers with the same job title can produce completely different destinies. One person optimizes for monthly cash, another person optimizes for a stake in a machine. One is selling labor, the other is collecting optionality. Do not miss the brutality here. A salary can make your life more comfortable. Ownership can change your class. That is also why a franchise can turn into wealth faster than many creative businesses. People with too much ego hate that fact. They want wealth to come wrapped in originality. But wealth often comes from executing a system more faithfully than the people around you. One location becomes 2, then 3, then 7. Same burgers, same fries, same operating manual, different outcome because somebody understood that a business must become a system before it becomes an asset. If you treat the franchise like a job, you stay trapped inside it. If you remove yourself from the daily grind and let managers carry the repetition, then the system starts carrying you. This is an important separation on the ladder. Labor pays you when you show up. Systems pay you when the process holds. And if you never learn that distinction, you can work yourself to death inside something you mistakenly call ownership. The same logic appears in partnering with an existing small business. Most people think wealth requires invention. Number often it requires pattern recognition, trust, and capital allocation. A booked-out plumber with no operating discipline is not a dead end. He is a machine with bad wiring. If someone brings in capital, basic systems, and judgment, that small equity piece can become very valuable. I call this quiet equity. Quiet equity is one of the most underappreciated fast rungs in the world because it does not flatter your ego. You are not the genius founder. You are not the face. You are not the loud visionary. You are the person who sees that competence without structure is underpriced. That is a very Buffett way to think. I have never needed glamour. I have needed asymmetry. The next ownership rung is even more condensed. You do not build the empire. You build something narrow and useful enough that a larger empire wants to buy it. That is a different game entirely. Most failed founders build what entertains them. Successful sellers build what relieves pain for a buyer. That may be a narrow software tool, it may be a workflow product, it may be a business with a tiny audience and a very clear utility. You do not need to dominate the world. Sometimes you need one acquirer with a big budget and a real reason to absorb what you built. I call this the buyer magnet. The buyer magnet is where problem solving beats vanity. Millions of customers are not always required. One desperate strategic buyer can be enough. Now we step onto a rung that can produce big wealth, but only after years of looking stupid real estate development. I respect this rung because it combines patience, leverage, land use, political timing, and capital courage. It is not quick in the daily sense, it is quick in the repricing sense. You can look wrong for years, then one zoning change, one highway decision, one lending relationship, or one completed project can revalue your position in a way salary never could. This is slow money that hits all at once. I call this the deferred explosion. Most people cannot use this rung because they do not have enough patience, enough access to capital, or enough emotional tolerance to sit in uncertainty. Again, this is the lesson of the ladder. The rung is not wrong. You are just not built for it yet. Now let us leave the ownership, heavy rungs, and walk onto one of the fastest legitimate ladders for people with little capital and no audience. Sales, not theory, not branding fluff, not motivational posters. Sales, if you can move emotion into action, you can earn faster than people with prettier diplomas and slower compensation systems. You do not need to invent the product. You do not need to own the factory. You need to survive humiliation long enough for your pitch. Timing, emotional control, and repetition to compound. High commission sales can create extraordinary income in 1 to 3 years for the person who can absorb rejection without collapsing. I call this the rejection furnace. Most people walk into the rejection furnace and come out offended. A smaller number come out dangerous. That is the difference. The market is not paying you for your self-esteem. It is paying you for your ability to hear no without becoming smaller. That is why sales can make a 24-year, old without pedigree out, earn many respectable professionals. The upside is uncapped. The company carries much of the product risk, and your skill gets paid directly. But do not romanticize it. If you cannot handle emotional friction, this rung will break you before it feeds you. Another fast rung for the sharp-eyed person is flipping. I like this rung because it reveals the core of capitalism in a very naked form. Something is underpriced, you recognize it, you improve the perception, the listing, the presentation, the access, or the audience, you resell it for more. That could be a couch, a car, a house, a collectible, or eventually an entire supply chain relationship. One flip feels like luck. 20 flips starts to expose judgment. 100 flips is no longer flipping. It is a system. I call this the I. The I is not about labor first. It is about mispricing. Most people do not get rich because they are willing to work harder. They get rich because they can see value where other people see clutter, embarrassment, or inconvenience. That is a much rarer skill than motivation. Now we reach a more dangerous section of the ladder because speed begins to increase while reality begins to thin out. This is where people start confusing money velocity with intelligence. Crypto run-ups, meme stocks, prediction markets, maxed out leverage. These rungs do create legends. They also create graveyards. I call this zone the borrowed speed zone, borrowed. Speed is any path where the money can move faster than your character has matured. That is why it is seductive. You can be early in a token, hold through chaos, and come out rich by timing, luck, and nerve. You can read a crowd better than the crowd reads itself and make a fortune in a prediction market. You can lever a correct move and multiply capital at a pace boring investors cannot imagine. And yet all three paths share a poison. They reward you before they educate you. That is the dangerous part. if you get paid too early in a game that is driven by reflexes, uncertainty, or leverage. You begin to believe your screenshot is proof of your identity. I call that screenshot poison. Screenshot poison is when a temporary outcome convinces you that you have permanent edge. Nothing empties an account faster than that delusion. You see it everywhere. A trader turns a tiny stake into a large one with leverage, then believes the first win was evidence of invincibility instead of evidence of exposure. The next move wipes him out. A bettor mistakes intuition for probability discipline. A meme investor mistakes survival through one drawdown for mastery over the market. These rungs are real. They do pay, but they do not forgive ego. I have made a great deal of money in my life, and one reason I kept it is that I have never confused being right once with having the right to bet like a madman forever. The latter punishes vanity harder the higher volatility goes. Attention is another explosive rung. A hit song, a viral post, a piece of content that the world cannot stop sharing. This is one of the strangest forms of wealth because to the public it looks instant, but to the creator it usually sits on top of years of invisible reps, failed attempts, and catalog building. Culture can scale faster than labor, but the payout often arrives after a long season of obscurity. I call this the attention spillway. The attention spillway can pour extraordinary value into your life very quickly, but only if you own what happens after the attention. That line matters. Views do not make you rich. Catalog does, distribution does, audience trust does, licensing does, product conversion does. Brand deals do. The viral moment is not the wealth. It is the gate. If you are unprepared behind the gate, millions of eyes still leave you poor. Again, the latter demands fit. Do you want attention because it flatters you or because you know what to do with it? Those are not the same ambition. Now let me say something many people do not want to hear. Inheritance and the lottery are not wealth methods. They are exposure events. They expose whether you understand the difference between wealth and income, between capital and consumption, between a pile of money and a machine that produces money. The transfer can be immediate, but the real lesson is not speed, it is survival. I call this lottery exposure. You can receive millions in a day and still remain poor in operating system. That is why one sibling receives an inheritance and compounds it, while another turns the same check into cars, obligations, favors, and regret. That is why one jackpot winner becomes anonymous, protected, advised, and rational, while another turns a winning ticket into a faster path toward public collapse. Money does not always transform identity. Often it simply reveals it. That is why I have never respected windfalls by themselves. I respect retained control. I respect allocation after emotion. I respect the person who can receive a sudden fortune and still treat it like seed corn, rather than a festival. Now, I will tell you the part that matters most. Not the lottery, not the meme stock, not the leverage trade, not even the franchise or the development project. The most important line in the entire piece is the bonus line at the end. The fastest way to get rich is not a method. It is proximity. Money moves in circles, rooms, groups, and networks. Deals happen between people who already trust one another, not usually between strangers refreshing search results alone at midnight. I call this the proximity premium. The proximity premium is not magic. It is physics. If you stand in dead rooms, you absorb dead ambitions. If you stand in rooms where deals are happening, equity is being discussed, capital is moving, and people are solving expensive problems, you become visible to forces that do not even know your name today. That is not unfair. That is how opportunity actually travels. Most poor people do not just lack money. They lack access to the rooms where money changes hands and decisions get made. That does not mean they are less intelligent. It means they are standing too far from the switchboard. A junior employee attends one event he almost skipped. He meets one founder that turns into one job, one equity package, one exit. Environment changes faster than motivation. You can grind for 10 years in a barren circle and call it discipline, or you can move toward dense circles of competence, capital, trust, and deal flow and suddenly find that effort finally has somewhere to land. I have always believed environment is an invisible multiplier, not because rooms are magical, because rooms contain incentives, information, confidence transfer, partnership opportunities, and social proof. Proximity shortens time. It shortens the time between competence and opportunity. It shortens the time between usefulness and visibility. It shortens the time between a good idea and the right buyer. It shortens the time between being capable and being chosen. That is why people who stay surrounded by low ambition, low trust, low skill, and low ownership can work very hard and still keep feeling like they are running in mud. Their ladder is leaning against the wrong building. Now, let me tie the whole thing together the way most people never do. There is no single fast path to wealth. There is a ladder, and the ladder is brutal about mismatch. If you are patient, disciplined, and emotionally stable, the boring rung may make you rich. If you understand systems and operators, quiet equity may make you rich. If you can survive rejection, sales may make you rich. If you have the eye, flipping may make you rich. If you can build useful products, a buyer may make you rich. If you can perform in culture and own what follows attention, virality may make you rich. If you can actually price probability and control ego, speculation may make you rich. If you can protect capital after a windfall, a transfer may keep you rich. And if you move into the right rooms, proximity may accelerate every single rung on the ladder. But here's the part I want you to feel in your chest. Every rung requires a different version of you. That is why imitation is so dangerous. A timid person copies a trader and gets destroyed. A weak operator copies a franchise owner and drowns in complexity. A poor allocator inherits money and mistakes it for infinite income. A worker with no network chases startup upside without learning how to judge founders or equity quality. A gifted creator goes viral and stays poor because he still thinks attention is the product. People say they want to get rich fast. Usually they mean they want the payout without the identity conversion. That is not a wealth plan. That is a fantasy. I have never been interested in fantasies. I have been interested in compounding, control, ownership, reputation, and rationality. And rationality begins with a question that sounds smaller than it is. What rung are you actually built for right now? Not the one that flatters you, not the one that would look good in a conversation, not the one that would make strangers envy you, the one that can actually convert your present temperament, skill, and environment into capital answer. That honestly and your timeline can shorten. Lie about it, and you will spend years acting rich on the way to staying poor. So here is the test. If you have discipline but not courage, stop worshiping volatility and start feeding the boring machine. If you have operating skill, stop pretending salary is enough and move toward ownership. If you can sell, stop hiding in low upside roles that protect your ego. If you can spot mispricing, stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a market maker. If you want fast wealth through attention, build the business behind the attention before the attention arrives. If you want to speculate, use an amount small enough that your identity survives being wrong. If you receive a windfall, act like a steward, not a tourist. And if your environment is starving your ambition, move rooms, move circles, move closer to competence, capital, and people who build. Because the most expensive thing in your life may not be a bad investment. It may be staying visible to the wrong future. I will leave you with a final choice, the latter forces on every adult. You can keep demanding fast money from paths that do not fit your current character, or you can deliberately become the person the right rung is willing to reward. That is the door, that is the threshold. That is the part almost nobody wants, because becoming the right person is slower than buying the right fantasy. But once you understand the latter, your decisions stop looking random. You stop chasing every glittering shortcut. You stop envying outcomes that belong to different games. You stop asking how to get rich in the abstract, and you start asking the only question that pays: which rung deserves me next, and what must I refuse in order to climb it cleanly? That is not a motivational line. That is a capital allocation decision about your own life. Make it honestly, because the world will always sell you speed. Very few people will teach you fit. And fit, in the end, is what keeps speed from turning into ruin.